Former independent Senator Joe Lieberman of Connecticut, who back in 2000 was the Democratic Party's nominee for vice president in an election that came down to roughly 500 votes in Florida. This election obviously very different. It was nowhere close. Senator, what is your reaction to our breaking news tonight?
Well, I begin by saying that the president made a call to the Secretary of State of Georgia that no election official at any level in American government should ever have made, let alone the President of the United States. It was reckless. It was contrary to basic American values. We're a country of the rule of law, and this call was basically an attempt to get the Secretary of State to do something that he believed the law does not require him to do. It also violates the basic principle of our democracy that people who govern are there by consent of the governed. And the people of Georgia have said, and the governor, the lieutenant governor, the Secretary of State, all Republicans who supported Donald Trump have said Joe Biden carried Georgia. So this call was irresponsible. It was reckless. It might have been illegal. If President Trump was in the middle of his term, I have no doubt that this call and the tape of it would be the basis of another attempt to impeach him for carrying out behavior that is not worthy of our American presidency.
If not impeachment, though, what can be done to hold him accountable?
Well, the main thing that can be done now, because he has less than 3 weeks in office, is for Republicans to reject his leadership. I know all the polls that show that the core constituents in the Republican Party still support President Trump, but honestly, who was it, Dante? The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of moral crisis preserve their neutrality. This is a time of moral crisis. And President Trump, Donald Trump, will take the Republican Party over the edge. Incidentally, I want to give a shout out and praise Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in Georgia. This man deserves a chapter in Profiles in Courage. The President of the United States calls him and basically asks him to change the position that he's taken after 2 or 3 recounts in Georgia and litigation that ended up in his favor. And he has the guts, the courage to quietly say no to the President of the United States. So that's the kind of behavior that I think we've got to see. And look, I'd be saying this if this was a Democratic president. This is just bad for the country. We can't take it anymore. Incidentally, the president also has to get to a point where he realizes that there's no more reason to fight. I said after the election, thinking about our own experience, Al Gore and me in 2000, where we did go to court. It ended up in the Supreme Court. It shouldn't have been there. The Supreme Court made a decision which we thought was absolutely wrong and infuriated us. But Al Gore said, for the good of the country, we've got to stop now. It was December 13th, 2000. The Electoral College votes were going to be opened up in Washington about a week later. And in the interest of our country, Al Gore said, that's it, even though we were bitterly disappointed. It's time for Donald Trump to do that because he's really playing with fire here. There are millions of people in America who are very loyal to him. And some of them are coming to Washington on Wednesday. Some of them have said, at his urging, some of them have said on their own that they may have to get violent. The president is at a point where if he doesn't stop soon, he will threaten the domestic tranquility of the United States. And, that's one of the reasons why our founders wrote the Constitution and started the United States of America, to ensure our domestic tranquility. I think President Trump has to be told by somebody around him that he's about to do something that will risk the domestic tranquility of the United States and frankly put people at risk of personal injury and danger.
It is. It's incredibly dangerous. And here you have at least a dozen Republicans on the Senate side. 140 House lawmakers, Republicans, will participate in this stunt next week, protesting Biden's victory and objecting to counting these electoral votes of a free, fair, secure election. You called the Secretary of State of Georgia a profile encourage. What do you call this effort?
I think this effort is another example of the disease of partisanship going wild in Washington. I mean, it's very clear that everything that's been done since Election Day in November regarding the presidential vote count has been according to the Constitution. The vote that's going to occur on Wednesday, where the electoral ballots are open from the different states, is purely ceremonial. I mean, if members of Congress look at the law that was passed in the 1880s that governs what happens on Wednesday, the members of Congress then passed that law to make sure that the will of the states was respected and that all that happened in Washington was that the envelopes are open and the votes were counted. I do want to say, again, another word for Al Gore. He was Vice President of the United States in December of 2000. He presided at the joint session where the electoral ballots from the states were opened. But he knew that he had no role beyond just basically opening the envelopes and presiding. And we discouraged the members of the Senate from joining the few protests that happened in the House because we thought it was wrong. And as a result, there was never a vote on those protests in 2000. Honestly, we've got to get back to that for the good of the country and for the domestic tranquility of the country, so we don't get into from a political debate here into what I fear could be civil unrest in America. It's not worth it.
Quickly, if you will, because I only have a few seconds left, but you're a dear friend of Senator John McCain, who himself felt the sting of a presidential election loss, but he still urged people to accept Barack Obama as their president. To see his party now, what do you think he would say?
Can I be honest? Well, a lot of what he would say is not repeatable on CNN, but he probably would say in McCain vocabulary, the wackos have taken over the National Party, his party. And he would hope and pray and work for the return of center-right Republicans. John was a conservative Republican, but he was an independent person who always put the well-being of the country first. And he'd really be dismayed and furious about what's become of the Republican Party today.